I want to talk about a Hexlex tweet. So a couple of days ago, YG Organization changed hands. If you're unfamiliar with this website, they do a really good job of reporting on new cards released into the OCG, which gives us a several month window to prepare for those cards coming here. If you want to stay up to date on premieres, it's the best place to do so, and apparently someone else thought so because they purchased the site. They also redesigned how it looked. I've seen a lot of tweets talking about how frustrating it is that it now looks like every other Web 2.0 website, but like, really? You're nostalgic for this layout? Anyway, YG Organization recently started posting opinion articles. I'm not sure if this is going to be a one-time thing or the start of a new series of articles by the previous site owner, but regardless, we got one for the new ban list, and as Hexlex points out in this tweet, it's not very useful. This article is meant to be a bit of an explainer for the new Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Limited list that goes into effect on January 1st, 2024. And it does so by going through each individual hit and offering a little bit of the author's insight into why that hit happened and what it means for the upcoming format. Except it's not written as a technical text explaining a ban list, it's written as like a giant bomb article.
And this kind of shit.
There's gamer-adjacent AVGN-style takedowns just sort of peppered in with actual insight, and as a result, it occasionally ends up a little difficult to read. Now, Hexlex condemns this just a little bit, but I want to get out in front of the hate. I think this article is fine. I think this article is very successful at what it sets out to be, which is one person's sarcastic takedown and opinion piece about the new list. In the resultant discussion, however, I found that people not only thought the article was bad, but they didn't really have a good vocabulary for explaining why it was bad. That's because they couldn't separate the badness of this article from the badness of over a decade of Yu-Gi-Oh! Content. This article is just one more in a pattern of years of Yu-Gi-Oh! Reporting that has largely usurped informative articles with content creator style sarcastic jabs at whatever they're talking about. This kind of begs the question, why are Yu-Gi-Oh! Players so bad at talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards? Articles like the one in the Hexlex tweet are so emblematic of just how weird Yu-Gi-Oh! Reporting has gotten. Discussions of cards are so often framed in the language of, oh, thank God this card is gone, I hated playing against it, or this card made me feel like an asshole, and so infrequently in like terms of this card is good or bad for the upcoming format. So today, I want to interrogate why Yu-Gi-Oh! Players suck at talking about the cards that we use to play the game that we all love. And thankfully, I think there's 3 reasons for this, which means we can sort them into categories that will be separated by a title card now. Okay, I hate to harp on this literally every time I talk about Yu-Gi-Oh!, but let's check out a parallel card game in Magic the Gathering. To my understanding, Magic largely doesn't have this problem. Yes, there are content creators that will make articles that sound exactly like what I'm complaining about, and certainly there's no shortage of individuals who will make reaction-style videos when Magic's ban list gets updated, but those are paired alongside a robust infrastructure of individuals talking about what the changes mean for the various impacted formats. In my opinion, the reason Magic the Gathering players are able to have that kind of intelligent discussion is twofold. Firstly, there is a reason to get to know every single card in the set. Yu-Gi-Oh! Players are usually not particularly literate when it comes to what's legal. This isn't really their fault. There's one format and every card that's ever been printed is legal. You're not going to remember like Taylor of the Fickle exists, for instance, right? Yu-Gi-Oh! Players specialize early. Usually they go to a tier list video, pick a deck they think looks like something they'd enjoy, learn the ins and the outs of the strategy, and just sort of hope whatever your opponent's doing isn't going to interact with you in any sort of meaningful way. If you play a deck like MathMech that occasionally gets new pieces of support but isn't itching for anything new, you could go like literal years without reading or learning any of the new cards. Inversely, if you want to play competitive Magic the Gathering, you are working with a much smaller card pool, and as a result, you need to be much more familiar with what cards play what roles. If you want to play one of Magic's limited formats, you are going to need to know what cards are good in that format, why, and in what scenarios you will pick those cards for inclusion into your strategy, which dovetails nicely into the second reason that I think they're able to have this conversation more effectively. Cards in Magic the Gathering are powerful based on what format they are being played in. Something that's strong in Standard might not be very strong in Modern, or something that's strong in Modern might not have legs in Standard. This means that every single card that is released is going to be scrutinized from a bunch of different angles. Is it playable within a draft format? Is it playable in one of several constructed formats with wildly varying power levels? And in doing so, Magic the Gathering players develop a skill for card evaluation that has to be practiced even by casuals. I can't make that clearer than the fact that there are entire formats dedicated to rewarding that expression of skill, evaluating cards and then deck building afterwards. Yu-Gi-Oh! Players don't actually ever have to exercise that part of their brain. It's really difficult for people to elucidate specifically why individual cards released in a new set are bad if they've never developed the underlying skills necessary to declare why any card is good or bad, or in what context it could be played. There's no limited format, there's a culture of net decking in Yu-Gi-Oh!, which brings me to... You know, at some point I'm gonna have to talk about how I'm part of the problem. But not today! So Yu-Gi-Oh! Content has just sort of shaken out in a very specific way over the last 5 years. Since COVID, and I'd argue maybe a couple of years before that, people have cared a lot more about content creators and their opinion than they've cared about the actual underlying card game. Now, I just want to get out ahead of admitting I'm part of the problem. I think that's fine. God knows caring about the Progression series in 2020 was a lot more fun than whatever Cecil format was, but it comes at the cost of consistent competitive content. I'd argue that a lot of the reason why people don't feel motivated to write something like an article series interrogating the underlying assumptions of the pendulum strategy, why every pendulum deck just loads up on extenders, why people are allergic to non-engine, why for some reason almost every pendulum strategy, regardless of how it's designed, feels like people are trying to force it into the mold of Build-A-Board, is because regardless of what you say in that article, the comment section is going to look the same. People are going to be typing penned best deck because they heard a YouTuber say it once. That's why a lot of these articles mirror the same type of language that you would see in a YouTuber-style breakdown. The people who are writing it are responding to the wants of a community that has largely displayed they want to see the Bussy Boy and Farfa argue for the 50th time more than they want to see a breakdown of what the Sun Avalon combo actually looks like. The domination of individual personalities and the decks that they champion also dovetails nicely into the third problem. So I talked about Magic in the first third, I'm now going to talk about Pokemon. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a lot of the same baggage as Pokemon. Competitive Pokemon is super interesting and engaging, but regardless of how interesting or creative the teams that people come up with are, the comment section of every Weedle Twineedle video is going to have a couple of references to a Pimp Night video that released in 2007 where a Magikarp swept a team of Ubers. There's this residual you have to win with your favorites attitude that's very pervasive among the Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Playing casual fan base, but also kind of leaks into the competitive fan base as well. Sure, a significant amount of commenters are incapable of talking about a card like Mathmech Circular without mentioning that a well-timed Blue Eyes White Dragon can make quick work of any enemy, but a lot of really good players also internalized some lessons from the anime and learned that sticking by your chosen deck is a virtue. There's no way you can have that opinion regarding deck types and also amass the breadth of understanding necessary to speak from a position of authority about a whole bunch of other decks. All of this coalesces into a weird, frustrating mess. There's no articles about the fallout of the list, except for ones by people unfamiliar with what the decks impacted do, but those articles are published even though they don't contain anything particularly helpful because you gotta publish something. That's how Yu-Gi-Oh! Content works! They got a Guido! Remember that meme? But the end result is the same. A community of gamers that are really, really bad at talking about their game pieces. I know what you're probably thinking. Okay, Joseph, Yu-Gi-Oh! Players can't explain themselves in a way that's satisfactory to you. Why is that my problem? Well, I think there's consequences to this. Yu-Gi-Oh! Players being bad at elucidating why cards are good and important for their decks betrays a larger problem, where Yu-Gi-Oh! Players straight up do not know why they are playing the cards they're playing. They know what a completed deck looks like, and they can get good at wielding the tools that are available in their arsenal, but they lack the neural pathways necessary to explain why each card is in each slot and why other cards shouldn't be there. And the few people in the community that do have that ability aren't writing articles. They're racking up YCS wins. There's a lot that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has to do if we want to be taken as seriously as a game like Magic the Gathering when it comes to competitive play. Certainly as players, a lot of that is out of our hands. Giving the platform necessary to individuals who know what they're talking about and are able to describe it is something that we're not going to be able to do at a local level. But one thing we absolutely can change from the perspective of an individual duelist is our mindset. It is good to practice skills like card evaluation that usually don't get tested. It's a strength to be able to elucidate why every single card in your deck is important without pointing whoever's asking to a Jesse Cotton video. And only when that understanding is commonplace will we finally receive Yu-Gi-Oh! Reporting that doesn't read like a Maddox article from 2009. That's it. See ya.